The room was impersonal, white, and deadly hot. One table, 3 chairs, 2 people. Intense eyes that are seemingly devoid of light. Hands sticky with red folded in a semblance of calm. Tears sliding all over an emotionless face dragging lines in the blood that didn't dry yet. The question that gets asked by the strict face on the other end of the table hangs in the air between them. The air smells of iron. Why? After what seemed like an hour, there comes a monotone answer. Because I loved her. Today is the day the world will end, and I will be the one to do it. The realization of what we are about to do sits heavy on my stomach, but it's the only way she can be. My girlfriend, I can't fathom why she would even choose me. We are traveling in my car. She is so beautiful. I feel guilty. She deserves so much better. She falls asleep, trusts me enough to be alone with me. She is my life, my death, my beginning, and my end. I gently shake her awake. We are there. The wind blows. Blonde hair tries to escape. Her scars shine in the sun, glitter and make her surrealistic, broken and glued back together with gold. She takes my hand and laughs. Her eyes change into little half moons. A short walk from the meticulously picked parking lot to the end. I am enjoying my time. She is here. The world is happy, despite everything. The world feels real. She does it. She saves me. I relish in her now that it is still possible. We are prepared. We have to walk a little, a last cup of coffee, a conversation about everything except our plans. I can't help but to stare at her. Will I be able to honor my promise? I can do anything for her. Who am I to reject her? I can see her enjoying her time, something I haven't seen in a long time. I edge it into my memories. This day is special to her, sacred, a last chance, a last wish. We walk on. She takes my hand again, warm and comfortable. I look at her as much as I can. White blonde hair, green blue eyes, a light scatter of freckles. Remember it, never forget. It's been a long time since I've seen her laugh this much. I love her, a tree and a street. We are at the place we have to be. I ask her one last time, are you sure? And I think, are you able to do this to me? Are you sure you are able to do this to me? Is it worth it? Is it worth the end of the world? I look at her scars, woven gold on her body, and know the last scar will be the last and most beautiful I will reach in this life. I don't see a way out. I don't see any choices. Captured in her will, her love, her revenge. Her will and her desperation is the only worth I have. So I ring the doorbell. My hand goes into my bag, just in case. She already has it in her hand. The door opens and there is a man, elegant and put together, a wolf in sheep's clothing. Her eyes betray fear, desperation, rage, and sorrow hiding her smile. She changes into stone and fire and hell. Before I know it, there's a syringe in his neck and he gets pushed inside. Tears stream over her cheeks, rivers of grief, weakness, and fury. She becomes even more beautiful and powerful, a goddess of vengeance, blood, and the end. I walk behind her and close the door, lock it, and help her drag the body of the man that broke her. I know what he has done. She didn't have a chance. No hope, no mercy. When he was done with her, she was a broken soul smashed to pieces, violated and murdered again and again. The only thing that remained was a hollow cocoon. And I fell for her. I wanted to fill her up, glue her together with gold and rubies, and this is how. This is her only chance for peace, for vengeance, and the peaceful nothing. I am her last chance, and I love her too much. I am not selfish enough. So I help her drag him, plant his paralyzed body on the couch, and wait for her to return. Is she wearing a white dress on purpose? The world becomes unreal with the first stab, even more surreal than it already was. I stare, transfixed and obsessed. I follow how the knife goes in and out of the body, staring at how her dress slowly changes into the color of life and death, how her rage spreads with the smell of blood until she is completely exhausted, and she laughs in a way I have never heard her laugh before, free and exuberant, all chains broken. Then she walks up to me, still holding the knife, and in a split second of madness, I feel fear, dread I had never felt before, fear of death and damnation. But she turns the knife around and gives me the handle. This is my hour. This is my time. This is the most important thing I will ever do in my life. We agreed to this. This is her last wish, a last effort to give her happiness and bliss. There's no way I'm going to decline. I don't have the right. So I take the knife, the sharpness and the cold that signal the ending of my world. She falls on her knees before me. The trust and weakness she shows me by exposing her throat to me makes my heart swell with love. I caress her neck and give her one last heartwarming kiss full of passion, trust, and surrender. I look pleasantly at her one last time and ask, with tears that keep streaming without end, "Are you sure? Are you able to do this to me? Are you sure you are able to destroy my world for your freedom? Please tell me you want to live. Please tell me that you can live for me." She shakes her head, and I don't have a choice. My life is hers, and she is my world. She wants to lay the world to ruin, so who am I to deny her of that? One last kiss, one last hug, one last touch. Then the knife slits through her throat. My face fills with tiny splashes of her life. Tears won't stop coming, as if a dam had broken in my soul. The world is dead. The end is here. Regret slithers through my veins like a deadly poison. I try to stop the bleeding in a blind panic. I cry and kiss and hug. Am I a monster? As if I have been drained, a feeling of emptiness dawns on me. I am numb and calm as I have never been before. It is as if I am in a trance. The world becomes unreal. The blood around me is a movie. A nightmare without end. Ever since I moved into my new apartment, I felt like something was off. It's an old building full of creaks and groans that you'd expect from a place built in the early 1900s. It wasn't the noises that unsettled me. It was the mirror in the bathroom. It was an antique framed in ornate tarnished silver with an unsettling presence that I couldn't quite place. The landlord mentioned it was an original to the apartment, a unique feature that added to the place's charm. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I noticed something strange. Whenever I looked into the mirror late at night, especially after midnight, my reflection seemed delayed. It would move but a split second slower than I did, like it was mimicking me rather than reflecting. I chalked it up to being tired and stressed from work. One night, after a particularly grueling day, I stayed up past midnight working on a project. As I passed my bathroom, I couldn't resist the urge to glance into the mirror. My reflection stood there, staring back at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I raised my hand to my face, and my reflection did the same, except it didn't stop. It continued to move, its fingers pressing against the glass from the other side, a sinister smile spreading across its face. Panicking, I turned away, heart pounding. The next morning, I convinced myself it was just a hallucination, a trick of the light. or my overreactive imagination. But the following nights, the same thing happened. My reflection seemed to be trying to communicate, to break free. Then one night, I stayed up late again, deliberately avoiding the mirror. Around 2 p.m., I heard a faint tapping sound coming from the bathroom. With a growing sense of dread, I crept towards the door and peeked inside. There, in the mirror, was my reflection. But it wasn't mirroring me. It was standing still, tapping its fingers against the glass, eyes locked onto mine. Slowly, its lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear but understood perfectly. "Let me out." Terrified, I backed away, bumping into the hallway wall. The next morning, I contacted my friend who dabbled in the paranormal. He came over, took one look at the mirror, and told me to get rid of it immediately. We wrapped it in a heavy blanket and took it to a secluded spot outside the city, smashing it to pieces with a hammer. As the glass shattered, a chill ran down my spine, and I felt an immense weight lifted off my shoulders. I moved out of the apartment soon after, never looking back. But sometimes late at night, I still hear that faint tapping sound, and I wonder if, somewhere, somehow, that sinister reflection is still out there, waiting for another chance to break free. I don't feel the same, not after what happened last night. I don't feel like anything is real anymore. I feel like it's all disconnected and distant. The people feel fake, like they're all in my dreams. This demon, I don't know how it got inside of me, but it's there. I know it is inside. I've went to the hospital and they've told me that there's nothing wrong, but they looked at me like I was fucking insane. They were doubting me in my time of need. It's just so fucking fucked up. I've tried everything, but I can't do anything. There's one option left, but I will do it after this note. This thing is to be known about if it is to happen to others. I had just gotten home after working hard at the mines. I live alone, usually with my cat, but she had gone missing a few days prior, so I would leave my back door open for her to walk inside as I relaxed around the house. I was sitting in the kitchen eating my dinner until I heard this knocking sound coming from the front door. I walked up to it and opened it, but nothing was there but some dark stain was in the grass just outside the light of my front porch. I didn't feel like walking out to see it, but something felt strange about it. I felt an extreme amount of paranoia. What if it was my cat's blood? I was too scared to go outside, so I went to take a shower. My boiler is busted, so I usually just take cold showers with spurts of warm water, but for some reason the water was hot, burning hot. The steam rose to the fan and I pushed through the pane to shut it off. After I did shut it off, I went to the boiler and tried to call the manufacturers of the model, but it didn't have a model number, serial number, or manufactured date. The man on the phone told me that there should be one. I told him the truth, but he started laughing. He started laughing at me. I hung up the phone and just decided to completely turn off the boiler. So I looked for the valve to shut it off. I could never find it. But I think it's because the boiler wasn't actually a boiler. It was fake, like everything else in my godforsaken house. I walked to the front porch and looked at the dark stain. I built up some confidence to go look at it. I walked out to it and tried to touch it, but my hand passed through it. It may have been a hole, perhaps, but I decided to leave it alone and walk back inside. When I walked inside, my home didn't feel the same. It didn't feel like home. Something wicked was inside, and I felt doom as its footsteps walked down the hall. I ran upstairs and shut my bedroom door. I heard a siren coming from outside like a trumpet as I shut off all my lights. I hid behind the bed near the window as I heard their thumping footsteps. The siren screamed outside, lights flashing through the window as they walked up to the stairs. I sat as still as possible. My door creaked open. I heard it. Then it shut. It was in the room with me. I could see its face in the darkness, their mask barely visible. It could see me, though. I could only see them now. I lost track of them the second they moved. The siren blared and it laughed as it walked towards me. The passing lights shined on the creature, their claws stretched along the surface as it moved in the darkness. I sat there as the footsteps came closer. Oh, so quiet they were. I heard it breathe as it stood over me. I wept. It touched me as it crawled into me. I screamed. I awoke on the floor beside my bed. It had long, deep cuts into the mattress. My dresser had cuts all along it, and I had a pounding headache. Yet, I felt like nothing. I walked downstairs to see my back door was wide open with dirty, inhuman footprints of a creature unknown. I closed it and scrubbed the foot stains off, yet no matter how hard I tried, they would not come off. So I ripped out the planks of the floor and burned them in my fireplace. I went to the mines and worked hard, yet I was alone in there as the darkness crept with a haunting siren. I came home to do nothing. I laid in bed. I could not sleep as the siren roared. I ate, but I could not swallow as it laid in my throat. I read, but I could not be entertained knowing it was inside me. I felt so horrible, like I was a fraud. The world felt fake as my home felt when the creature entered it. The house is in ruin, much like myself. My boiler has fallen over, my food has gone rotten, and my cat is dead. There is nothing. No family to see, no friends to have. The people around me are so distant. They don't listen to me or see me. I hate it. I hate it all. This demon inside me tells me horrible, horrible things. I don't want to listen to it, but they deserve it. I am torn on what to do. Let the demon win, listen to it, or try to take it with me. I think I should do the world one last favor. It's my cousin Tim's 7th birthday. I sat around the table with all the other cousins making small talk. Even though I'm 24, I still sit at the kids' table for all the family events. I suppose I'm still a kid at heart. Besides, I don't think they'd let me leave anyway. While we're digging into our cake, my cousin Jimmy notices something. "What's that beeping noise?" he says, shoveling a forkful of cake into his face. I listen for a second and sure enough, there is some kind of beeping. Everyone else at our table hears it too. I call over everyone at the adult table. "Maybe it's a smoke alarm from blowing the birthday candles out," my brother John says. We check the alarm, but the source of the noise does not come from here. My cousin Tim is the one to find out. "Guys, over here, under the table." We rush over, lifting the plastic table cover. Underneath the table is a metal contraption with a timer. It's covered in what appears to be patches of human hair and skin. The red text reads 2 minutes. Suddenly, the front door of the apartment slams shut. John runs to it, pulling on the door, but it won't budge. The timer continues to count down as a note slides under the door. "Kill someone to stop the timer." "Is this a joke?" John calls out. Tim runs into the kitchen with a terrified look on his face. We all stare at the horrible metal device under the table with 1 minute remaining. "Fuck! What do we do?" I say. "No one's dying today," John says. "What happens when the timer goes off?" my wife says, fighting back tears. 30 seconds left. I turn around and in a split second I see Tim lunge for John, a knife in his hand. He slices him right in the throat. John grabs his throat, blood gushing out of it. Everyone screams. All I can do is stare in fright as my brother collapses to the floor in a puddle of blood. With a sudden click, the timer stops with 10 seconds left, and the lock on the door unlocks loudly. "I'm not dying on my birthday," Tim says, dropping the knife. I restrain Tim, and my wife calls the police. They arrive at the bloody scene, baffled. A bomb squad is called in for that thing under the table. Sure enough, it's determined that the device would have killed all of us had the timer gone off. The cops say that they're going to run testing on the skin and hair to find out who it belongs to. I have no clue what will happen to Tim as they take him away. Strangely enough, the cops make me fill out a non-disclosure form, though I ignore it in the following days. I mean, how could I not talk about something as bizarre as this? A few days later, the family joins again at John's funeral. Closed casket, of course. No one expected this to be the next family gathering. It's quiet because everyone is still on edge. As the ceremony draws to a close, we hear that dreaded sound once again. It's coming from inside the casket. When I walked into our house, I was expecting Mom to be there with a frozen bag of peas. She knew the drill. It wasn't my first fight at Round Valley Middle School, but I knew it would be my last. By Monday, every locker, classroom, and lost pair of sweatpants would be under 200 feet of water. But Mom wasn't there. The house was quiet. "Mom," I said. It was 1 p.m., 3 hours earlier than I normally got home. Dad was usually in his office on a work call, with Mom in the kitchen working on her next strange project. For the last few weeks, it had been pickling carrots. When I walked towards the kitchen, I saw a note on the counter. "Billy, went into town to finalize some things. Be home around 5. P.S. Don't let anyone inside the house, even if you know them. Love, Mom and Dad." I crumpled up the paper and threw it in the trash. Then I went to the freezer for my peas. The boy who punched me was an old friend of mine, although we hadn't been friends for a few weeks. Ever since the town decided to forgo our land and turn it into a reservoir, the energy at school shifted. In a way, it felt like our lives were ending, even though the mayor said we were simply moving up the hill. Apparently, reservoirs are good for generating power and would help fund the town's longevity, blah, blah, blah. When I told Dad about that, he simply nodded, then changed the subject. "Whatever they tell you," he said. Then started taping up another box. I didn't really understand it. All I did understand was that everything I knew would soon be gone. I opened up the freezer and pulled out the peas. As I pressed them onto my face, the pain intensified. He got a really good shot on me this time. The fight happened during math class. The teacher scribbled some numbers on the board, then called on me to say what they equaled. I made up a number. 54, I said. The class laughed. My face felt hot. "No," she said. "Sometimes something will take the place of something else, like a symbol taking the place of a number. In this case, the answer is X." More laughter. "Don't worry, Billy," my old friend said, turning to face me. "The monster isn't going to feed on stupid people." When I opened my eyes again, I was on the ground, collapsed between the overturned chairs. He was underneath me, his face covered in blood. People started screaming. I didn't know what I was doing, but I felt better. Then he managed to get a fist free and hit me in the eye. I fell back. The teacher pulled me off him. Then an hour later, I was suspended. They didn't even bother calling my mom this time. The principal told me to walk home. I stood in the kitchen for a moment, the cold offering relief as my thoughts did the opposite. I hated being the problem child. I wish I could be more like my sister, even though I kind of hated her. Then, as if she heard me, the door opened. I turned to look. "Shouldn't you be at school?" she asked. My sister was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed. "Bailey?" I could just make her out, my good eye decoding the shapes. "What happened to your eye?" she asked. "What happened to boarding school?" I asked, mimicking her tone. "I took the bus in," she said. "I wanted to spend one more night at the house before they drown us." I sat down at the kitchen table and took the peas off. My face was getting numb. Bailey sat down across from me. It was strange that she had come back. Her school was 2 hours away by bus. She wasn't supposed to be home until the holidays. "So," she said, pointing at my face, "your eye." "It was nothing," I said. "Is someone bullying you?" "No," I whined. "Just stop." She looked different today. It had been the longest time we'd ever been apart. I didn't realize how much a face could change in just a few weeks. Mom and Dad are going to be so mad you're skipping boarding school, I said. I got permission, she said. My teacher thought the reservoir was a mean thing to do to our own town. I shrugged, hating that I agreed with her. It wasn't fair that we had to move because of some energy company wanted to build the reservoir. Plus, this whole situation led to a bunch of silly rumors. According to the boys at the lunch table, there was some creature living in the woods, and the water was a way to wash it out. In the last few weeks, a few dogs turned up dead, along with an old woman in her home. According to some eyewitness accounts, aka drunks, different townspeople had been wandering down Main Street on the night of each attack. Apparently, their mouths were covered in blood. Then, the next day, those same people would be walking around town like nothing happened. Johnny from school said it might be a skinwalker, I said to my mom a few nights after they announced the reservoir. 3 of us were around the dinner table, Bailey already off to boarding school. That's silly, Mom said. I think you should switch lunch tables. Dad went on to say that monsters weren't real. The dogs got attacked by a bear. The old woman fell down her stairs. The rumors were just rumors. I was thinking about those rumors as Bailey leaned forward. She brought her voice to a whisper. Do you believe them? She said. Do I believe what? Those rumors, she said. I shook my head. That punch must have knocked a few screws loose. Was I saying that out loud? I asked. Bailey shrugged. I wouldn't call it a monster, she said, then smiled. Maybe it's just hungry. I looked at her for a moment. She was always correcting me like everything I said was the stupidest thing she'd ever heard. It wasn't enough that she was the pretty one too. She had bleached blonde hair, blue eyes, and freckles, while I got left with black hair and dirt eyes. Our whole lives, people would stop us on the street and say how cute she was, how she should model or date their sons. I figured I would at least get the brains, but she got that too. She excelled so much at school that the boarding school across the state reached out to us to see if Mom and Dad would send her there, free of charge. I asked if I could go too, and my parents said they could never afford that, so I was stuck at the school down the road with the peeling paint and cockroaches. Tell me about this new school, she said. Where's it going to be? Just up the hill, I said. It's all the same, though. Same teachers, students, bullshit. Bailey smiled and stood up. She went to the kitchen and grabbed an apple. She pulled a small knife out of the knife block and sliced off a piece. Change can be good, she said, sliding the cut apple into her mouth. She smiled as she chewed, bits of apple flying out and onto the table. She was normally such a prim and proper eater. It was strange to see her so ravenous. Within a few seconds, she took the knife and sliced off another piece, then slid it into her nasty apple-filled mouth. I don't want things to change, I said. Before I knew what was happening, the apple was gone. No core, no stem. It had disappeared. Did you eat the... By the way, she said, her mouth empty again. When do our parents get home? I paused for a moment inspecting her. I had never done any drugs, but maybe she had started to do them. I knew it made people a little weird, and she was definitely being a little weird, if not a lot weird. Soon, I said. They'll be home soon. Bailey nodded, then glided the knife across her fingertips, pressing down on the skin just enough so it didn't break. It looked like she got some kind of pleasure from the pain. Are you okay? I asked. Bailey nodded, but wouldn't look up at me. She looked preoccupied by something. There's barely any trees up the hill, she said. I kept staring at her. She pushed the blade too hard and sliced her thumb. No blood came out. Bailey, I said, you cut yourself. It's not good up the hill, she whispered, shaking her head. The valley was perfect. My muscles tightened. I kept looking at her, scanning for cracks. This was Bailey. It looked like her, smiled like her, talked like her. But something was off. A cold wind coming up from the cellar. I knew I wasn't smart or good looking or charming, but if there was anything I did have, it was intuition. I knew which crop season would be good or bad. I always knew when it was going to rain a few hours before. I knew if Mom and Dad were upset by something. When I felt something, it took over all my senses, and I definitely felt something here. I stood up from my chair and took a step back. Now Bailey's eyes locked onto mine. She held the knife in her hand and stepped towards me. "You look frightened," she said. I couldn't talk. My spit dried up. "Don't be frightened," she said. "Tight muscles aren't good for meat." I covered my face as Bailey leapt towards me. Before it all went dark, I could see her features melt away, like wax dripping down a candle. Her blonde hair turned to straw grass. Her eyes twisted into something small and beady like mouse eyes. Her skin wrinkled, then glowed soft and red. She made a sound like an eagle on fire. It filled my head instantaneously, ravaging my thoughts. As her hands gripped my shoulders, I flew back into the wall, slamming my head on a picture frame. Her breath was hot and rancid like summer pond scum. Then I heard another sound. The screen door flew open. She jumped off me, and I listened as her claws tapped across on hard wood. I opened my eyes. Bailey, or whatever she was gone. Mom and Dad were standing in the doorway. They ran over to me and lifted me up. Dad looked around, the color stripped from his face. Mom looked like she was going to vomit. "Was it here?" Dad asked. I still couldn't speak. "We don't need to finish packing," Mom said. "Let's just go. We can buy new things." "But, Bailey," I finally said. "We'll call her at the hotel," Dad said, then lifted me on my feet and pushed me out the door. A moment later, we were in the car. I kept looking out the window, waiting to see her again. Then, in the distance, I noticed something. In the cornfield next to our house, a few rows of crop were flattened, the stalks around them shaking. The hotel was full of people from the town, like some kind of refugee camp. I even saw my old friend who I punched. When we locked eyes, we nodded to one another like the whole encounter had created some kind of respect between us. When the shaking in my hands finally went down, I took a shower and got ready for bed. As I laid there on the stiff motel mattress, I listened as Mom tried and failed to call Bailey's school. By the third attempt, my heart sank. Mom looked worried too. Then, miraculously, I heard her voice. "Sorry," I heard through the phone. "I was at the library. Big exam coming up." Mom continued on with the conversation, her worry melting away. Meanwhile, Dad came over and sat on the bed next to me. He put his hand on my knee and looked at me. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, then shook my head. "Sure," I said. "Maybe. I don't know." "Maybe it's good," he said. As Mom went on asking her standard check-in questions, I could hear Dad's breathing pick up. He was normally a rock. Now, he looked like a scared child. I looked up to him. "What was that thing?" I whispered. Dad looked at me, then shook his head. "Just get some rest," he said. "The waters will be here soon."